Alright, today I'm going to be going over every single album that I listened to in February of 2023. Of course, I did this last month. I also did it at the end of 2022 where I went over every single album I listened to that year. We're going to continue doing this. I'm going to try and do it every month this year. If you haven't seen one of these before, basically I'm just going to give a quick, like 1 or 2 sentences, maybe more, but just quick thoughts about every single new album that I've listened to. Repeat listens don't really count on this, so let's say I listened to Igor. The first time I heard that was in probably 2020, so listening to it again this year, I'm not going to give it a review. Only new listens, first listens. So yeah, let's just get into it. Due to the unique combination of kind of dusty hip-hop drums, ambient and electronic elements, and indie rock leanings, this album by Panchiko is really difficult to pin down. Really, my only gripes come from the last 4 tracks of this album. While the story behind the Rot tracks is cool, the tracks themselves don't really add much to the overall experience. Man, the vocals on this one are cringe. That's really all I gotta say. Listen to the vocals and just try not to cringe, because it's pretty bad. With this album, the Unicorns kind of perfectly walk the line of having fun and not taking themselves too seriously, while also creating some of the most snappy, cheeky, cartoonish, and groundbreaking indie rock at the same time. It's been a while since I've had a rapper kind of keep me engaged in the way that Nas does with this album. I mean, the flows are impeccable, the bars are cold, clever, and consistently hard-hitting. The consistency and cohesion of this album shouldn't be overlooked either. Every track has a purpose, and with the help of kind of lyrical motifs and, again, cohesive production, all the tracks feel like they're perfectly and purposefully intertwined. This thing is a classic, and it's fantastic. We got another classic here. I've always been kind of skeptical of the Beatles. I don't really know why. Maybe I just thought they were overhyped. I came into this expecting it to be kind of overhyped, but yeah, I was wrong. This is as amazing as everybody says it is. Meet the all-new 2017 Ford Super Duty. Time to punch work in the face. This is the next level. This is the all-new Ford Super Duty. If you don't get it, basically this album is just truck commercial music, and it's bad. It sucks. John Coltrane's vocal timbre is kind of unmatched, but this album tends to kind of just feel too one-dimensional for my liking. Okay, so this is probably the most hyped album of the month, of the year, probably so far. And while this is an exciting change of pace for Yachty, I don't think it's perfect. I think it's far from perfect. Yachty's performances, and I know lots of people have said this, are definitely the weak spot of this album. And I do feel like the overall flow of the album could be improved with kind of more subdued tracks interspersed between the bangers. If Yachty's gonna continue with this sound, which I hope he does, because like I said, I love when artists, especially a mainstream artist like Yachty, experiments with his sound and does something different. If he's gonna continue with this sound, he's definitely gonna need to improve as a songwriter and a vocalist. Like I said, this album has its great moments, but I feel like he can still improve in a lot of aspects. Well-textured synths, irresistible grooves, nostalgic chord progressions, and kind of hilarious self-deprecating lyrics makes for an extremely likable dance record here. I respect Collier's music theory knowledge, but he just doesn't really have any compelling ideas for songs, especially on this album. And I also am just not a big fan of his voice. His voice just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Ocean Roar is at times too focused on creating crushing soundscapes that it often sacrifices the songwriting that historically has made Phil's music so special. This is just kind of boring dad rock. There's not much else to it. I'm gonna try and say his name right here, Obanjar? Obanjar? His unique vocals are often overshadowed by some pretty cliche lyrics and a handful of corny rap verses on this one. This album by The Strokes features an endless display of pop sensibilities, an intriguing mix of distorted and bright guitar tones, and some deceptively intricate guitar work. However, I do feel like the project can tend to feel a little bit emotionally vapid due to the pristine kind of cleanliness of the mixes. I mean, Rhapsody sampled 24K Magic before Kendrick, so Rhapsody, better than Kendrick, confirmed. But for real though, if you want some bars, if you want charisma, great features, and just a bunch of songs with like 3 beat switches each, this is definitely the album. On her predecessor to her 2021 masterpiece, I believe it was, sometimes it might be Introvert, Little Simz demands the listener's attention on this album with her cold-blooded flow, charisma, and introspection as well. This is probably my favorite album of 2023 so far. Parannoul alternates between kind of euphoric beauty and distorted density with ease on this album. Check this thing out if you haven't, it's fantastic. The track Lonicera, not sure how to pronounce it. That track is kind of the perfect example of less is more, which is an idea that this project and a lot of Red Veil's music kind of rarely follows, and to its detriment. Gloria! Sam Smith's striking vocals and vulnerability can only do so much to make up for the overdramatic abomination that is Unholy, the single, and the mind-numbingly annoying hook on Gimme. This thing was a lot better than I expected to be, but it still has some pretty weak moments. Baby Keem is pretty hit or miss with his flows and lyrics on this album, but when he's hitting, it makes for some of the most ignorant and hilarious trap I've heard in a while. While the second half of this somewhat ruins the flow of the album, each song on this thing is driven by some beautiful imagery and a powerfully emotive voice. The passionate performances on this one generally outweigh the issues I have with the vocal shortcomings and some mixing that can often cause the guitars to lose their edge. Despite her tendency to fill her lyrics with cliches kind of to an annoying amount, Vu's song concepts and the colorful production makes for a pretty consistent record here. This is probably my second favorite album that has come out this year so far. This thing is catchy, it's likable, it's dynamic, and it's detailed. This is my first Young Thug album. I know it's titled a mixtape, but you get what I'm saying. And yeah, he's easily one of the most eccentric vocalists I feel like I've ever heard. I don't love every vocal inflection that he goes for here, but even when I don't enjoy an inflection, I can't deny that it's just consistently and constantly entertaining and engaging. Bon Iver is really talented when it comes to creating a unique atmosphere, but similar to Forema Forever Ago, I can't help but feel like these songs are just kind of too one-dimensional because of a lack of progression. What Gorillaz' debut lacks in eccentricity that their later projects had a lot of, is made up for by some low-key jams that feel desolate and lonely. This album's right up my alley. It does a masterful job of kind of balancing dark and dejected post-punk with almost like Radiohead-esque guitar lines and soothing jazz at point. A lot of the production elements, and especially the vocal effects, remind me of Quedeca's album that he dropped last year, I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, which is probably another reason why I'm loving this thing so much. While combining modern R&B and electronic elements with folky violin is kind of intriguing, this album is actually at its best when it kind of strays away from that gimmick. Jimi Hendrix, man, he's him. This is a 75-minute masterpiece by one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and it's also important to point out that it never feels overly flashy or showy to the detriment of the actual songs and the actual music. This thing is a classic. It is amazing. I've never been a huge fan of Future. I've always felt like he's been a little bit overrated, and this album pretty much solidified that for me. I just feel like Future isn't that interesting of a voice when compared to his trap contemporaries. Like I just named Young Thug earlier, he's a lot more interesting. The auto-tune is kind of just way too excessive on this album. And even with the auto-tune, Future struggles to hit the right notes when doing melodic performances. The best part of this album is the production, but even that can sound pretty dated at points. I mean, you just can't convince me that Bjork is even a real human. This entire album, Bjork just feels like an otherworldly entity that we have somehow gained access to listen to. While this one doesn't feel as cohesive as Vespertine, the ideas are somehow even more unique and out there and interesting. I tried really hard to get into this one, but at the end of the day, it just feels like kind of a bunch of talented MCs, which they are undeniably talented, but the production just doesn't really do much for me. The samples are okay, but I just feel like a lot of the beats just lack flavor. This is an angsty, groovy, hypnotic, and exciting combination of 80s post-punk aesthetics and funk, of course, and it's driven by a vocalist that sounds like he's on the brink of losing it at any moment. Another classic here, this is a peppy, catchy, explosive, and even maximalist at times experience that provides endless amounts of fun. I love the choice of drum sounds and specifically the snares on this album. The flow of this project from track to track is so good that it feels 20 minutes shorter than it actually is. I do have some gripes with it though. My gripes mainly come from the disjointed structure of individual tracks. There's some occasionally goofy rhythm sections, and the fact that it leaves me feeling unsatisfied due to how fast the experience goes by. While the vocal melodies are pretty one-dimensional on this album, this one still stands out as one of the most fun indie rock records of my childhood. I mean, it's nostalgic. I love it. This one is just so painfully boring. There's nothing like outright awful about it, but the instrumentals, the production, and the vocals are just so bland that it tends to just kind of completely fall into the background. It pretty much takes everything likable and fun about indie pop rock and dumbs it down into a soulless product. I wasn't big on their new album at all that came out last year, but you can definitely tell that this is back when they were actually passionate about what they were making. They actually sounded like they wanted to be playing music and that they wanted to be in the studio. You know, you can feel the passion emanate off of this one, unlike their newest album. Prog rock can be really hit or miss for me, and this one was mostly a miss. Also, the track W, Alternate Take, is kind of the One Whole Day by Dixie D'Amelio of prog rock. Go listen to One Whole Day, and then go listen to W, and you'll see what I mean. All right, and the last album, Bright Eyes, I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. This is a mature exploration of existentialism, time, failed relationships, and ultimately a hope for a better life. Conor Oberst's writing is some of the best I feel like I've ever heard. Every song is just filled to the brim with quotables, stunning imagery, and a relentless focus on the song topic at hand. I love this thing. This thing is amazing. And I love the folky instrumentals as well. It's just, the writing is really what stands out. I love it. All right, that's it. Those are all the albums. I'll go through the top 5 and bottom 5 of the month as well. I did that last in January as well. Top 5, we had Illmatic at 1. We had London Calling at 2. Electric Ladyland by Jimi Hendrix at 3. We had I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning at 4. And then we have Who Will Cut Her Hair When We're Gone by the Unicorns. Bjork just missed out on the top 5 of the month, but she's obviously Homogenic, still a great album. For the bottom 5, we had as my least favorite album that I listened to this month, Rush by Mainskin. Terrible. From 2 to 3 by Peach Pit. Boring. Generic. Soulless. Remember Never Before by July Talk. Cringy. Corny. Tacky. Bittersweet Cry by Red Veil. I'm really trying to get into Red Veil. I can't. The mixing, it's just, I don't love it. And then Monster by Future as well. Kind of overrated, in my opinion. Those are the top 5, the bottom 5. That is every single album that I listened to in February. Why do I say Why can't I say February? February, I said. Let me know down below your thoughts on these albums. Let me know if you heavily disagree with anything. I'm going to be doing it for March as well. Let me get in the middle here. And, yeah, so look forward to that. How many albums was that? Was that 40 something? Let me just check. Let me check so I can flex how much music I listened to this month. 41 new albums this month. I'm proud of that. That's pretty crazy. And yeah, that's going to do it. Leave a like if you want. Subscribe if you want. Go join the Patreon. We got tons of uncut reactions coming out over there. So go join that if you're interested. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.